I love Friends. I think it goes down as my all-time favorite show. And don't we all just long for what they had? I know it's totally fictional and unrealistic. For most of the show, they're single and don't have kids, and they have seemingly endless time to sit around and hang out and drink coffee. But I think that what made this show so very successful is that it captures a longing that's within all of us. Don't we all long for friends who know us, who accept us, and who never leave us? Wouldn't we all want a friend who would pee on any one of us? John 13:34-35 tells us, "A new command I give you, that you are to love one another. Just as I have loved you, you are also to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." I mentioned last month that shortly after moving up here, I felt that the Lord began working in my heart, calling me to build relationships and reach out and use the gifts that He'd given me for our community. And while on a high level, that's absolutely true, that's what I did, and that's what that season looked like, it wasn't as easy as it might have sounded just from the high level story of it. You see, in order for me to be motivated enough to work through all the issues that I had surrounding being a pastor's daughter, the Lord had to put me through an intense season of loneliness. I remember one time before Ryan and I had moved back up to the Central Coast when we were visiting, Ryan asked me where my friends were. I was kind of like, what are you talking about? And he said, well, every time we come up, we see your family, but it doesn't seem like you really have any friends that we go visit. And I told him that most of my friends, had moved away from the area, and that, through the college time, I had kind of lost touch with them. And so when we ended up moving back up here, while we did have my family, and I realized that that's a lot more than most people or some people have when they come to a new place, I was starting totally over when it came to friendships. My best friend for my whole life had been my cousin Brittany, but our relationship was going through a weird phase and was kind of in a weird place. The first 20 years of my life, my cousin Brittany and I had been like inseparable. We'd, done high school and college and done everything together. But after we got married, that level of closeness, of like being each other's other half, wasn't appropriate anymore. And in that time, in shifting our relationship to a new place, it just went through a difficult season, and there was a lot of just weirdness and hurt feelings on both sides. So I had moved back to my hometown, and ironically, I lived only 2 streets down from Brittany, my best friend, for my whole life, but I felt friendless and profoundly lonely. It wasn't too bad those first couple years that we lived here, because I was still working and, being pregnant and having Noah and adjusting to all of that. But as my work hours started cutting back from full-time to part-time, I started to feel the void. I remember coming to Mom2Mom and Tuesday morning Bible studies that first year after I had had Noah, and walking into a room with 100+ women and not knowing where to sit. It felt extra mortifying because it wasn't like I didn't know these women. In fact, some of them I'd known my whole life. In some ways, I used to wish that I didn't know any of them, because then I wouldn't have felt so awkward going up and introducing myself to them, and I could have asked them those standard, like, where are you from? And those types of questions. But instead, I was totally aware of all of the group dynamics, all of their history, and I didn't know how to suddenly try to start inserting myself into their friendships. So after about a year of showing up awkwardly to church events, trying to not make it look too obvious that I was following my mom around, and or bravely sitting alone, I was tossed what felt like a lifeline by the Lord. A group of girls was starting a bunco group, and they asked if I wanted to be in it, and I jumped at the chance. I remember my mom asking me before that first meeting who else was going to be in the group, and I told her that I didn't know, and quite honestly, I didn't care. I just knew that I needed friends, and beggars can't be choosers, right? You know that old adage that you have to be a friend to have a friend? I'd gotten sick of hearing that because it felt so scary. How are you supposed to be what you don't have? And how are you supposed to put a fragile and vulnerable heart out there and risk it getting rejected. It took me time, but finally I got desperate enough to try it out. One of my college roommates from Southern California called and said that she had a small group leader whose sister was moving up to Templeton, and would I be able to reach out to this girl and try to introduce her to some people. I remember that first Sunday at church when I followed Vanessa Duhan out into the courtyard. I awkwardly introduced myself to her, and it felt forced and weird, and she seemed totally confident. I didn't feel like she seemed very lonely. I felt like she probably thought that I was weird. I gave her my phone number, and then for the next week, I was kicking myself. You know, you're not supposed to give your number to them. You're supposed to get their number. She wasn't going to call me. But lo and behold, about a week later, she did text me, and we got together to hang out, and a new friendship was born. And it wasn't very long before I was able to get Vanessa into that new bunco group that had started, and everybody loved her. And that really kind of began my unofficial ministry of reaching out to new moms at our church. To be honest, in the beginning, at least 30% of my motives were selfish. I was looking for friends. But I also didn't want anyone to ever feel as lost and lonely in a crowd as I had. I wanted to make finding friends and community easier for people. So after Vanessa came Noelle and Kate and Brianna and Lori, Amy, Elise, Caroline. Everywhere I went, I was on the lookout for moms that looked like they could use a friend. Of course, that happened slowly though, and gained momentum over time. And I jumped a little ahead of myself. The first night of Bunco was June of 2012, and I remember confiding to those girls that I was pregnant with my second baby. 2 short months later, I received the surprise of my life, finding out that my baby was babies and that I was expecting twins. Finding out that I was going to be a mother of 3 boys under the age of 2 brought my career to a grinding halt. By November of 2012, I wrapped up the part-time job that I had at a tech company, and I found myself home alone with a 17-month-old, pregnant with twins, right at the beginning of winter. The feelings of depression and loneliness that I had been battling roared to life. I remember one cloudy afternoon pouring my heart out to the Lord, asking him to bring me a friend. And I was asking not just any friend, but specifically I was seeking like a very, very close, potentially best friend. And I knew that was a big ask, but that was what I needed and what I desperately desired. A few hours later, Noah was restless and I was desperate to get out of the house. So he and I walked over to Bethel Park. To my surprise and delight, one of the girls that was in my new bunco group was there with her kids alone. And we got to hang out and connect. And that was really the beginning of an amazing answer to that desperate prayer. That girl and I started meeting at the park a couple times a month and carpooling to bunco. A few months later, when I gave birth to my twins, she organized a meal train for me. We started hanging out with our kids, and then without kids and getting together. And then in that next fall, randomly, but of course we know that nothing's random with God, she and I were placed in a Bible study group together. It was in the most unlikely season of my life, shortly after having twin boys, when that friendship was born. Those next 3 years that I embarked on were the most challenging years of my life. They were profoundly difficult. And those girls, that one friendship and then my bunco group, my relationship with those other women became a lifeline for me that got me through that really difficult time. It certainly hasn't always been easy making friends and building relationships, and I'm an extrovert. So I know that this is hard. But I learned a lot in those years about finding friends and being a friend, and I want to share it with you. The first thing, and this is the most important thing, is having our relationship in Christ safe first. Megan Fate uses an analogy that I love of us running around with little cups of love, and we're splashing our love on people around us. And we're hoping that they're gonna look back and that they're gonna love us and they're gonna like us in return. And when they like us and they approve of us and accept us, it fills our cup just a little bit. It's never enough to satisfy, but it's enough to keep us running. But when they don't appreciate us and when they don't love us, it leaves our cup empty. And then we're standing there with empty cups, looking around at other people who are also holding empty cups. Friends, God needs to be the one who fills our cups. Ephesians 3:19, Paul prays that we would know this love that surpasses knowledge, and that we may be filled to the fullest measure of the knowledge of God. When we are looking for others, for our worth and our validation, it is exhausting, it is stressful, it's draining. And sometimes I feel that, and that's my cue to know that I'm looking to people for that identity and for that source and validation instead of the Lord. When you do that, it's time to repent and take a step backwards. The Lord is the only person that we need to please, and he is well pleased with us. Living for an audience of one is freeing. And so I encourage you, take your needs to the Lord and let him meet them first. The second thing is to pray for it. In Matthew 7:7, the Lord tells us, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened. God encourages us over and over in his word to bring our desires before him. But he's sovereign. He knows what you need more than you do. So prayer is powerful, and the desire for community and friends is something that we're encouraged to have. So we know that that's in God's will for us. So take those requests to him, but then be prepared for him to meet them differently than you hoped or expected. My third point, you have to be a friend to make a friend. And guys, I know that's hard. But 1 John 4:7-8 says, Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. I know that it's cliche and it's hard, but in order to build relationships, you have to be willing to put yourself out there. If you find yourself in a lonely place when you get to church or Bible study, rather than looking around and noticing the groups like I had a tendency to do, look for other people that are alone and go up and reach out. My fourth point is to ask questions. People love talking about themselves, and they feel so loved and valued when you ask questions. And so I would just encourage you to do that. Before I get together with somebody, a lot of the times if I'm being, if I'm on it and being prayerful, I will think through, what did I talk to the last time I was with them? What did they have going on in their lives? What are some questions that I can ask them? And I, sometimes I'll even write them out, but at least mentally, I will go through a few questions that I want to ask that person to make them feel loved, to make them feel special, and to build a deeper relationship. The next point is to invite people. Invite. In 1 Peter 4:8-10, it says, Above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. I remember, it was probably 2 years ago, we had a speaker that came to Mom2Mom, and she talked a lot about hospitality. And she said something that has just stuck with me. She said, in inviting, you are being like Christ. Christ invites us into relationship with God. He put himself out there, and he sacrificed everything he had for people who ended up rejecting him. And we're called to be imitators of Christ. So being willing to extend that invitation and inviting people to do things. Like a sub point under that, sometimes when we think of hospitality and we think of extending an invitation, we think of having another family over for dinner, and we imagine this scene of this clean house and this beautiful meal that you're going to serve, and there's going to be 8 children, and it just feels so overwhelming. Take that expectation off of yourself. It does not have to be that you're inviting people into your home or over for dinner. Think of what you're already doing. Think of what you have planned for the week. And then think about a couple people that you can invite to join you in what you already had planned. That's, for me, the easiest way to do it. Am I going to the beach? Am I going to the zoo or the park? Am I going to go for a run or have coffee at some point that week? So thinking about what I already have planned and then inviting people along into it to join me. But no one really cares what your house looks like. I know that that's something that holds so many of us back. And I just want to encourage you to, after having your identity safe with Christ, to just get over it and get yourself out of the way. So often we think, of, going to this perfect house and, having to have it all together. People don't care about that. They really don't. They just want to be welcomed. They want to be desired and thought of and invited. And then I remember Janet Abels always used to say that inside everyone's just a desperate junior high girl. And I loved that. Deep inside all of us somewhere, no matter how confident or together someone looks, is like a junior high girl inside that just wants to be invited and included and asked to join in. Say yes. When people invite you to do something and when you're looking to build a relationship with that person, if there's any way that you can make it happen, say yes. It's usually not going to come at exactly the perfect time, and it's usually not going to be what you'd ideally want to join them in doing. But take it at face value. They want you to come or they wouldn't have invited you, and say yes. If you can't, for whatever reason, go to whatever they invited you to, invite them to something else back. Even the most hardy extroverts, and that would be myself, if you continue to turn them down, if you turn them down several times in a row without them extending an invite or initiating a way to get together in return, they'll leave you alone. And if that's not what you want, then say yes or reciprocate. During that season when I was really looking to build community and relationships, I did a lot of saying yes. And I'm not talking about like every PTA meeting you could possibly join or being the room mom and all those things where we overcommit ourselves. I'm talking about, with specific people that I knew I wanted to build a deeper relationship with. So I got invited to be a part of a book club. I got invited to go to a conference, and I went, and I knew, I knew one girl out of 5 that was going to this weekend conference, but because I really wanted to build a relationship with that one girl, I went, and it ended up being great. I joined a Bible study, a summer Bible study with a group of girls that I didn't know, but again, because there were 2 girls that I did know that I really wanted to build strong relationships with. The next thing to keep in mind is that there are different kinds of friends. You may have heard the saying, there are friends for a reason, friends for a season, and friends for a lifetime. I think we all long for that last category, that friends for a lifetime. But in reality, we're going to be blessed with, somewhere between 2 and 6 of those that are going to be there, that are going to endure for our whole life. The rest of the people are people that God's bringing into your life, either for a specific reason or for a season, and they're to be loved and to be enjoyed. But I think sometimes we just need to let go of some of the pressure that we put on our relationships. You may have heard the adage, someone before you, someone beside you, and someone behind you. I love that thought, and that's the thought of having somebody who's pouring into your life, someone who's a few years ahead of you that you can glean wisdom from, someone that you're walking alongside, and someone that's encouraging you and that's right there with you in it, and then someone who's behind you. And the idea of being intentional in our relationships and having someone that we can be pouring into in return. If you're in a season where you're looking for friends or you're really striving to build deeper relationships, I would challenge you to think through who your friends are. And even though it sounds super silly, maybe even list that out. But when we list things out and when we think about like relationships in an intentional way, it makes us more committed, and we're much more likely to remember. At different points in my life, I've written out different lists. Maybe right now you're looking for close friends, so it might be good to like list out who God has in your life and who you think like has the potential to be a close friend, and what you can do to try to be intentional at building that relationship. Or maybe you're in a season of mentorship and leadership, listing out who you could be, you want to start trying to pour into, will help you stay focused and be more committed. Friendships are going to wax and wane like the moon. There are going to be times where a friend, like we're seeing them all the time. Maybe our kids are on the same soccer team and we're just in a season where we're getting to spend a lot of time with them. And then that season shifts and life changes and we suddenly aren't seeing them near as much. I think so often as women, we take that way more personally than we need to. And we hold our relationships too tightly. I think it's freeing for ourselves and for other people to open our hearts and to just allow and enjoy relationships while the Lord has them with us, and then to hold them loosely. And, as long as nothing happened, be okay with the fact that that you're in a season, where you're maybe not spending as much time together. Expect rejection, hardship, and failure. And I'm sorry that that's discouraging, but that is the way it goes. Satan's desire for each of us is to isolate us and to tell us lies. If we are lonely, guarded, and depressed, then we aren't making an impact for the Lord. I can't think of a time when we have been more lonely and isolated than in this last year during COVID. COVID has taken an emotional toll on our society, and it's also taken a relational toll on us. Whether you've been quarantining for the past year or not, circles have certainly gotten smaller. No longer do we see casual acquaintances at school drop-offs and sports practices. People we used to be close with, we just sometimes don't see because work and social functions aren't happening. We've also had differing opinions on how to navigate this past year, and never before have our politics or our opinions on the way the world's happening at large, never has that impacted our relationships and friendships like this past year. For some of us, the emotional toll that has been taken has been hard. I had a really good conversation with my friend Sarah over the summer, and I wanted to bring Sarah up and just kind of walk you through how we navigated just a challenging conversation and a challenging aspect to our friendship. So Sarah, will you share with them kind of what was hard and what point our relationship hit?
Yeah, I think after the initial shock of COVID, when everybody started settling into the long-term response of the pandemic, I started realizing that I was viewing things very differently than you and some of my friends, and I find myself really confused and anxious about that. I couldn't figure out how to reconcile how I felt about things with your actions, and I've known you for a long time, and I know you love God, and I know you were doing your best with your choices and your perspective, but I found myself stuck. I knew my heart probably needed an attitude adjustment, and but I didn't understand you, and that was really hard for me. I felt discouraged and kind of started shutting down and disengaging a little bit, and I knew that was not a good direction to go, and so I knew we needed to talk. But I actually initially reached out to church leadership at first because I thought it was a safer place to process with somebody that I didn't know their perspective, and so I thought it might be more neutral, and that was really helpful, but it didn't take care of our relationship. I think I was still worried that you might be judging me or that you felt judged by me, and I wasn't sure if I would still be accepted if I had such a different view about everything, and that was really scary for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how did our conversation go? What happened?
So I remember one night after book club, we were walking back out to our cars, and it was just you and me, and you asked how I was doing, and I got really honest with you, and I just said, I'm struggling. I'm having a really hard time right now. And we spent the next hour or two shivering in our friend's driveway while our husbands were probably wondering where we were. And you listened to me, and I was really relieved. And you didn't try to change my mind or tell me that I was wrong or defend your opinion. But you were also really honest with me, and I had some strong emotions, but you didn't take it personally, and I felt heard, and I was reassured that even if I did see things differently, that I was still loved and accepted. And when I felt heard, it helped me process my own thoughts better, and by hearing you in your honest response, it helped me understand where you were coming from, and I think that was key for me. I think I had been stuck in my own isolated view, and you helped expand my perspective. I think one of the things we talked about that night that was really helpful was how to do church during COVID. And what helped me was to remember the importance of church. Church is a place for people to find God, a place of refuge in a time of crisis, and a place where you can find hope. And there were a lot of people in crisis last year, a lot of people that wanted to turn to God maybe for the first time or the first time in a long time, and they needed people to meet them where they were at and to be loved. And I remembered what it was like when I didn't know how to go to God on my own, and how much I needed the church to help me and teach me how to do that, and how people meet me where I'm at when I need it. And I had forgotten about that in the midst of everything, and I needed that reminder. So I think I was able to start understanding that night that there was more to the picture than I had been focusing on, and it helped me move into being thankful for you and your response, even if it was done imperfectly at times, just like my response was imperfect, because we're all imperfect and we're all just trying to do the best we can, and we all need grace and forgiveness at times. And just to continue with full transparency, I still struggled with being triggered back into criticism or confusion or anxiety at times, and still needed to continue processing after that night. But I was able to remember that the goal was love and unity, maybe a little bit quicker each time, and realize it was okay to reach out for help instead of being stuck.
Yeah, and same for me. I mean, listen, like being able to talk to Sarah and hear from Sarah, it really did. It was super helpful. It was able to shift my opinion and help me realize, like, wow, there really is a whole nother way to be looking at this. And, you know, while I still feel like the way I'm choosing to navigate it works right for my family, it was just so good and so refreshing to have that transparent conversation and be able to take a step back and hear and see things from another perspective. What did we realize that we had in common?
I think we realized that we both wanted to love the people around us the best that we could. It was actually pretty simple. We both wanted to see the church do the most loving thing, and we both wanted to be a good witness of a caring Christian, and that just looked really different for both of us. With families and circles that we were in, we both just went a different direction with that, but there was no true correct answer. It wasn't black and white. Our day-to-day actions looked very different, and we didn't agree on what it looked like, but our motivation of love, I think we realized, was the same, and we respected each other's view. And it was okay that we didn't agree. We could still choose to love and respect each other. I think our conversation helped free me to be able to start giving grace instead of criticism. I remember that my job is to love people, and God doesn't always give us the full picture, and we might not always understand. He doesn't ask us to understand, though. He asks us to trust that he's in control and to choose to love either way. Proverbs 3:5 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. And Colossians 3:14 says, above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds us together in perfect harmony. So I think we both saw that it didn't matter if our opinion was right or not. We needed to come together as sisters in Christ and remember that loving each other was more important.
Totally. So, you know, fleshing out kind of like all the fringe, I mean, we could still disagree on all the minor issues, but because our common goal was both that people were being loved and that, you know, Christ was being communicated to people, because we had that, like the rest of it was like, it was okay. It's okay that Sarah thinks this and I think that, because of our core motivation being the same. And what did we disagree on?
Just how it looked,
Totally.
Just the day-to-day, what our actions were throughout each day.
Yep. And then what did we do that worked? Like, how were we able to continue?
So I was only able to connect really in the evenings or on the weekends, and so we did evening or Saturday morning walks outside the whole year. You were able to and willing to sacrifice your time to get together with me when I was available and free to connect, and we did some walks outside in the middle of winter at 7 o'clock in the morning while we were freezing. So, I mean, yeah, that's a good friend. And our book club also was able to accommodate each other the whole year, even though we were also a pretty mixed group with our views, and it was pretty cool to see how that worked, right?
Yes. I mean, if you have 8 girls, we had people as far to the right and almost as far to the left as you could be. But through it all, we were able to have some tough conversations and find ways that we could still continue getting together, even though everybody had to sacrifice a little bit. This is a relationship where we walked through a difficult conversation and kind of came out on the other side. And because of that, you know, Sarah and I have talked, and, you know, we both feel like this is a relationship where it worked well, right? You know, we both have relationships where things haven't gone so smoothly. and where things haven't been so easy. So thank you, Sarah, so much
Thanks.
for being willing to come up and hang out and talk to me. So I just want to challenge everybody to think about how this relationship has impacted friendships over the past year. Is there someone that you need to circle back to and try to have a conversation with? I know a couple people in my life that I probably need to do that with. And so I would just challenge you to make it a priority and to be brave. How can we as the church show Jesus to people if we don't get along? And my last point is that friendships are hard work. It's almost never going to be convenient when your friends need you. If you want to have close relationships, though, you have to be willing to sacrifice for other people. You have to show up when they need you. It's watching their kids, it's making a meal, it's taking the phone call, it's going for a walk. Proverbs 17:17 tells us that a friend loves at all times. And of course, boundaries are important, and you can get into relationships with people who are taking, and it's one-sided, and that can be unhealthy. And absolutely, your relationship with the Lord comes first. Your relationship with your husband and your children come next. But you know, friendships can just be such a blessing and such a richness and such a testimony for the body of Christ. And then I would just challenge you to allow yourself to need other people in return. And that's hard, but nobody can be close to you if you don't allow other people in. And so when people offer and try to be there for you and you don't let them, it's like you're blocking and not allowing them to get close to you. So being willing, when you sense that somebody is worthy of your trust, being willing to let yourself need them and allow them into your life. And then finally, we need to lean into the Lord in our times of loneliness. No matter how many friends you have in your life, you are going to walk through seasons of loneliness. Without a doubt. And they're going to be unexpected. So you might have seasons where you're like, I'm so inundated with people, I can't even imagine being lonely. But it will come and it will happen. And sometimes the Lord leaves those desires of our heart, and that loneliness is there for a reason, and it's to drive us back to Him. In John 15, Jesus says, I am the true vine and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, He prunes it, so that we'll be even more fruitful. About 2.5 years ago, the Lord worked in my life in another unexpected way. That best friend relationship that I had made, that I told you had been such an answer to prayer, He pruned from my life. It was incredibly painful and disappointing, but through that time and now, I can see how unbelievably faithful and good He is. The Lord will take care of you, He will provide for you, and He will never let you down. One big way that the Lord provided for me was through my relationship with my cousin Brittany. Like I had said before, Brittany and I had been best friends those first 20 years of our lives, but we went through a weird phase. That weird phase lasted about 10 years, but through several, heart-to-heart conversations, it started coming back, and that was about 5 years ago when it came back. So He brought my cousin back into my life in a real significant, meaningful way before He pruned that other friend out. And that just felt so gracious to me now as I look back on it. By the time that friendship was removed from my life, I had built relationships with so many other women. So when that loss came, while it was absolutely heartbreaking, there were other people in my life who had stepped up and loved me through that season. They walked with me and cried with me, called me, checked in on me, and they were there for me. One night when I was really upset over the loss of that friendship, I remember crying to Ryan. And I told him that I felt so rejected and abandoned by someone that I thought was my best friend. And he told me he was so sorry. But he also said something that I'll never forget. He looked at me and he said, but babe, I thought I was your best friend. I haven't left you. He was so right. And that took, a few days for me to process that statement. But I think what I realized was that he was right. He is absolutely my best friend. But a lot of the time he was so busy with work and had so much going that it just didn't seem or feel like he cared very much about all my little mundane mom crises. And I owned that I went back to him and had a conversation and just said, babe, I know I talk too much, but if you're going to be my best friend, and I want you to, I really need you to listen and to try to care. And this hasn't been perfect. It's still something that we struggle with. But it's beautiful and so special to me to know that my husband desires to be my best friend. And right in that season, Ryan got a new job, and he started having every other Friday off. And so we've gotten time over the past couple years to spend while the kids are in school. We've gotten time during the day, and we've played pickleball and hiked and gone to the gym together and done home projects and just kind of had time to buddy around. So that was really cool that happened right at the same time that close friend was pruned. Unfortunately, that was also the friend who our family went on vacations with, and our kids had become great friends. Our husbands got along well, and we celebrated minor holidays as families and went to fun events together. So having my kids ask why we didn't see this other family anymore was really hard. But here again, the Lord met our needs and he provided. Friends that we had been close to before were able to draw even closer. And so through the Russells and the Wellingtons, the Lord started, bringing other communities of family into our life. And then the Lord did something even really funny and little to show himself faithful. Since about the time the twins turned, 3 or 4, I'd been wanting to do like a getaway with Ryan and maybe another few couples and go like to an all-inclusive place in Mexico. And we had tried to do that a couple times, but it hadn't worked out. And then about a year after I lost that best friend, my husband got a call from a guy in his Bible study inviting us on a trip to Mexico with 5 other couples. And through that trip, our relationship with 4 other families was born. We've been given a new group of friends, new community, and new relationships for our kids. And so it was just amazing to see, even just little desires, how the Lord did that. Another silly thing, but that was huge for me, was the blessing of hand-me-downs. This friend had given me clothes for my oldest son to grow into. And when that relationship was lost, I thought like, okay, I was blessed to have this while I did, but I'm not gonna get hand-me-downs anymore. But then Michelina started bringing clothes to me, and then Rebecca, and now Jen and Joy give me clothes, and I have clothes coming out of my ears. And it's kind of silly, but God has blown me away with his generosity and his love. Where I used to have one primary friend that I ran with and laughed with and prayed with and vacationed with, I now have many friends that fill each one of those roles. I'd always been a kind of person that liked having one best friend. I felt like if there was one person that I felt safe with, then I could go pour out to other people. And God has shown me that that's not true. He's the only one that will never leave us. He's the only one who can fulfill the desires of our hearts. His will prevail. It's not going to look exactly how you wanted it to, but he is the gardener. Let him prune this area of your life. Pruning is often painful, but your job is to cling to him, the vine, and offer your fruit. Don't hold back. I'm here to tell you that it's worth it. Someday when we get to heaven, all there's going to be is God and people. Relationships matter because only people are eternal. As Christians, we're the family of God, and our community is supposed to be what draws others to the Lord. I promise that you're going to get hurt. I promise that it's going to cost more than you want it to, and it's going to take longer than you ever thought. But do not give up. God will be faithful. You have to be looking for it, though. You have to be looking for that faithfulness. My story could have sounded so different if 6 years ago, or when that 6-year friendship that I had longed for and built, when that was pruned, I could have quit and just shut down. And trust me, I was tempted to at times. It hasn't been easy. Many of you have watched me struggle over the past couple years, and you know that I haven't done it perfectly. You have seen me fail, but praise God, he is faithful and he is writing my story. And even though it has been hard and I have been hurt, I didn't quit because I trust the gardener. I have continued opening my heart to relationships, people, and ministry, trusting that he will sustain me and that he will produce the fruit. I urge you to do the same. Don't let your fears, disappointments, and hurt in this area of your life, in friendships and relationships with other women, don't let that hold you back. Surrender those disappointments and hurts to the Lord and continue to put yourself out there. Is there someone that you need to make amends with? Is there someone that you need to reconnect with? Do you have a relationship that's been damaged by COVID that you need to circle back to? Is there someone the Lord's calling you to reach out to? Trust the gardener. Do the work that you feel like he's calling you to, and leave the results up to him. He will be faithful.